All right. I think it's time. It's time to talk about Noah's Ark. Now, if you followed any of the other videos before this one, it should begin to become apparent that you're not going to get the same version of the story that you are most likely used to. And then it's slowly beginning to dawn on me that I'm only going to make enemies with this. I don't want to make enemies with this. I want people to hear this and go, yeah, thank you. That's exactly what I thought too. No. Obviously, traditional Bible-believing Christians are just... they're going to throw their computers and they're going to hurt somebody. Bible scholars are going to be looking for my credentials. So, where do you graduate? Where do you get the authority? Who told you these things? No, nobody told me these things. I didn't read these somewhere. This is just what I think. It's just what I think. That's it. It's just what I think. It's probably wrong. Just watch it to make fun of me. In fact, just make fun of me. That's fine. I'm good. I'm very good. But like all people in the past that have pushed through the collective mainstream, and even as Gandhi said, even if you're, what did he say? He said, the truth is the truth, even if you're the only one that believes it, or... Noah's flood, as you can see by this pretty standard children's book, image, whatever it is. There's a giant boat at the top of a mountain with a rainbow and birds and animals. Luckily, the animals have stayed segregated 2 by 2. There's no mixing. And the people look at, I'm hoping it's the rainbow, maybe it's the birds, and they're in what appears to be a tropical valley, and the lion is laying down with the sheep. Lamech lived 182 years and had a son. He called his name Noah, saying, "This one will comfort us concerning our work and the toil of our hands. Because of the ground which the Lord has cursed." After he begot Noah, Lamech lived 595 years and had sons and daughters. So all the days of Lamech were 777 years. And he died. And Noah was 500 years old, and Noah begat Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves of all whom they chose. And the Lord said, "My spirit shall not strive with man forever, for he indeed is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. Then there were giants on the earth in those days, and also afterwards, when the sons of God came in to the daughters of men, and they bore children to those men who were of old, men of renown. Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thought of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord was sorry that he had made man on the earth, and he was grieved in his heart. So the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, creeping thing and birds of the air, for I am sorry that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. So for some reason, there's a sacredness, there's a sacred cowness to the Noah story that I've never been a fan of evolution. Not a fan of pompous, arrogant assholes as a general rule. I'm also not a fan. How do I put this? There's a certain amount of bad relationships that you have to go through before you get to a place in your life where you start to struggle with irrational people. It's always good to keep yourself grounded and sympathetic to all people, right? All people are important. All people have a huge value. Every person is equally valuable. It's not always easy to remember. I don't mean that in an arrogant, ignorant way. I mean that in every way possible. Everybody is a priceless diamond. Even the crazy lady at the store who can't seem to figure out how to put her shopping cart over all the way and stands next to it, and you just want to get to the peanut butter, but you can't. Right, even she is just as important as I am. I'm saying that because if you believe this image, you're not alone. There's literally 2 billion people. In fact, I think it's more. I think maybe there's a similar story in Islam, which would make that like 4 billion people have a pretty positive view of this image. Which means that I'm about to make 4 billion enemies. I think 1 billion people are of no. So they're atheists, so I don't know where they'll fall on this. I don't know what the other, what is that, like 3 billion? What are the other? I don't know. Here's the deal. It is entirely possible that sometime in the distant past, the earth was covered by water. In fact, I'm pretty sure that probably happened somehow. However, I'm going to date this story to about 2300 BC, and I can say not 100%. Nobody's 100%. But whatever, just below that, 99.5%. That in 2300 BC, the earth was in fact not covered by water that rose to a height of like 30,000 feet. Pretty sure that didn't happen in 2300. However, Noah, in fact, did live about 2300 BC. And of that, I'm whatever's just 99.5% sure. And that's the story I'm going to tell you today. Now, previously, and I apologize, and I am going to do my best in the future to minimize the Titanic Lord of the Rings length full feature film videos that I produced on the Cain and Able thing, but I felt like if I didn't get all that out there, then I couldn't tell this story properly. So I also believe that I'll just release these little chunks at a time, and it won't just be one unbearably long-winded thing. It should be so. That being said, you have to watch the previous one. You have to. Because this story is what we're looking at here when we were looking at the screen. Not that, but after that, that's the end of chapter 5. This is the beginning of chapter 6. And we're going to go through the first, 8 verses of chapter 6. Chapter 6 is it's like an old sitcom from the 90s where they left you hanging in one episode, and a week later when you pick back up, they had to spend the first 3-4 minutes kind of filling you back in because you had forgotten. And I think that's literally what a lot of what at least the first 8 verses of chapter 6 is it's retelling the story of what it was happening during the time of Cain and Able. So all of the stuff that we had talked about with the rise of the city-states and the warring Lugals and the rise of the Kish, that's what this is. It's a bringing you back to speed so it can take you somewhere new. So what I'd like to do as my 90s sitcom recap version is I'd like to show you the first few verses in this Hebrew English verse by verse breakdown, so you can see the words and maybe in addition to having a probably semi-detestable view of the traditional Noah story, there's some fellas that I've seen on YouTube and various other places that they've made a career out of taking the esoteric things and running so far into left field that they end up playing right field, if you know what I mean. And this idea of the Elohim and the Nephilim and the fallen angels and the Watchers, and there's a whole another universe. There's like the Marvel Universe offshoot movies that are made just from these characters, and I'm hoping to help you see that I don't think that's what this is actually saying. Let's start with the first verse. And it came to pass, and you're going to notice this is just sort of broken, choppy English as it translates itself to get to the end of the sentence. And that's okay. I think you can go grab a Bible and read it in the normal way and see how they get there. But I just want us to see this. And it came to pass when began men to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them. And the reason I'm showing you it like this is because there's key words that if you can put them into a context, it makes the knee-jerk reaction to shove them into fabulous stories maybe a little less. For example, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth and daughters, there's a lot of speculation on the daughters for sure. Not so much in this first chapter, but as we go along you'll see. And I want to apply at the same time all of the other lessons we've been talking about. I mean, we've started with the idea that a man is a country, a nation, a group of people. So when men, ha-adam, let's go look at that. That's the other reason we're doing it this way. And they're saying this is man, the same kind of man that was created in God's, the plural God's image, right? That man, the one that I have been stating is a nation. So when the people of a nation began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters, now daughters, let's go look at that one. Bath, feminine, daughter, maiden, ostriches. Well, it's got an asterisk, so we'll let that one be. But here's another interesting one: towns and villages, and I believe somewhere it said cities as well. That there's this concept of towns and villages. Now, I've been saying, and I still hold to this, that women are belief systems. But there's also a long standing, I don't want to call it tradition in Christianity, of women representing cities. And I initially was kind of like soft on that. I wasn't so sure. But I'm, and I think we're going to see another daughter in a verse or two that we can compare this with to back up this claim. I'm gonna accept the town, city, village motif, because the people and the culture, right? Like if you have because we're going to talk a little bit about sons and we're going to talk a little bit about daughters. And a daughter, if you look again, the daughter is not a named person. So I'm thinking there's something to the namedness of the women that becomes important to be 100% a belief, because this is a deeper thing. There's levels on this. So let's let the word daughters be a city. And a city is interesting because yes, it has people, but it has a flair, it has a flavor. If you go to Cincinnati, it feels like Cincinnati, which doesn't feel at all like Dallas. And Dallas is nothing like Paris, and Paris is in no way Tokyo, right? So it's not simply just the people. It's, if it was just 1 million people together and everything felt the same, well, that's not a daughter. The daughter is what gives it its flair. It gives it its personality. The beliefs is where all the interesting flavor comes from. So let's just see if we reread that and replace daughters with city. And it came to pass when the nations, the people in this area began to multiply on the face of the earth, and cities were born to them. I could also state it something like, in early Sumer, gnomes began to pop up, which included villages and cities, and the various city-states of Sumer began to emerge. Verse 2, that saw the sons of God, the daughters of men that were beautiful, and they took for themselves wives of all whomever they chose. So that saw the sons of God. So the sons of God, Ha Elohim. Let's look at that one. This is one of those. This Elohim, this idea of Elohim it's one of those words that's, it's part of that thing I was referring to, that kind of people go into some pretty deep places. But even if we just look at Elohim, and we just look at some of they're saying divine being, exceedingly God, gods. But then it goes from gods to great judges, mighty rulers, shrine. So something I want to keep in mind as we, because this is not, how do I put this? It's complicated. It's all nuanced, complicated stuff. Take a pharaoh, or these early Sumerian kings, or Eastern kings in general. And I say that with care, because it was an Eastern thing. It's never really picked up in the West. In fact, we went a different direction, but we're kind of going that direction, but in a different way. A pharaoh believed that he was a god, or they believed the pharaoh was some form of god. And that's not an uncommon Eastern king thing. And the stars, right? When you die, then you would become one of the stars. So there's also this notion of the rulership as a god, as a great judge, mighty ruler god. So let's call the heads of the city-state, these Lugals, or the head of God. So the only time we had an Eastern is with the Pope. Here I go, poking another 2 billion people. So the Pope kind of acted as if he was God's spokesman on earth. That, I think, is a good explanation of Elohim. A dudes, a group of elite, religious, related leaders who kind of let all of the bullshit go to their heads and start saying things like, I speak for God. So, if that's the case, then the man gods saw the cities that men had built, and they thought they were beautiful, and they took for themselves wives of whichever one they wanted. Or the kings of Kish started conquering multiple cities and becoming hegemonic leaders in Sumer. And I'm going to read verse 3. And said Yahweh, not shall strive my spirit with men forever, for indeed he is flesh, and yet shall be his days 120 years. Yahweh. Let's take a look at Yahweh. The proper name of the God of Israel. The proper name of the God of Israel. The one who is the absolute and unchangeable one. Ever living as self-consistent and unchangeable. I am he who I am. It is not no concern of yours. I am, this is my name. I am who I am. In Judaism, you're welcome, Judaism, you aren't allowed to say God's name. They call his name Yahweh, and they spell it, as you can see here, like that, or even more so like that. But it's not actually God's name, because God's name is a secret and it's inutterable. Now, I don't have any action. I'm fine with that. It is what it is, right? That's their belief. If we go back to a previous video where I spent some time talking about God, I'm going to hold that God is in fact the spirit of humanity, the real and true and only God that matters. Not these pharaoh dickhead God guys, but the true God of the world is the spirit of humanity. And that's Yahweh. And it's interesting, they won't say who he is or what his name is. So, back to the thing. And said, the spirit of humanity. My spirit, right, of humanity will, the people of the earth will not put up with terrible leaders forever. With bad countries, let's say countries, will not exist in these terrible countries forever. Because remember, a country isn't real, you know. I went back and I had said some things previously like Yahweh and Jehovah and Jesus. They weren't real, but they were real, but they weren't real. Countries aren't real. There's no such thing as a country. Countries are a figment of our imagination. But we agree with the image, and so as long as we're all pretending, but at some point, all the people just stop pretending, and then countries fall apart. For he is flesh, and yet shall be his days 120 years. Hey, these things, these imaginary countries, they only go well for so long before they just sort of need to go away. Let's call that 120 years. That's 6-3. 6-4. Here we go. We're finally getting to the good stuff. The Nephilim were on the earth in days those, and also after that, when came in the sons of God to the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. Let's go take a peek at the Nephilim. Nephilim, giants. Name of two peoples, one before the flood and one after the flood. There were giants in those days, before and after those days. There's another one here. Let's see. It's interesting. It connects with Orion, and we already had a little talk about some Orion connections. Ironically, and this will begin to show up. Orion is holding a bow, and he has a belt, and he's called a hunter. And they were referring to mighty hunters, so there is some interesting connections there. Here's another one. Nephilim, a feller, i.e. a bully or tyrant / giant. Well, let's go back and take a look. The Nephilim were on the earth, and it is also after when they came to gods, and those were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. And I think what they're saying here is, if I really like, I went too far. I really like this version that we just looked at. Right? These bullies or tyrants. So let's take a look again. Let's remember the story that we told last time. The kings of Kish became hegemonic dynasties of multiple city-states simply by exerting their aggressions upon weaker people. One could argue that's kind of bullying. and it's kind of tyrannical. And we didn't talk about it long, but if you go look into the story, the Epic of Gilgamesh, he's related also to the flood myth. And we notice that the flood of Sumer is directly related to the first king of Kish. So there seems to be kind of like a continuous, like, hey, these bullies, these men of renown, Gilgamesh was a man of renown of old. Or as they show, let's go look here, these Nephilim were on the earth, and also after that, when came in the sons of God, the daughters of men, they bore them those mighty men who were of old. Men of renown. So they're saying the Nephilim, these bully Lugals, were on the earth in those days. And also after that. Bullying tyrants have been around the whole time. And when those bullying city-states came in, or when those bullies, those sons of God, when those religious political leadership, when they, right, not the people leading the people, when those people, those are the sons of God. The priests are the sons of God. Jesus was not a son of God. He was the son of man. So the arrogant leaders are the sons of God. So when those, NC came into, when those tyrannical, bullying political leaders, and they were taken whichever city they want, and when they went into those cities, those daughters of these sons bore them children who were the mighty men, right? So the Ensis and the Lugals went into the cities, and it bore them children, the Kish, the dynasty, the hegemonic dynasties. Those were the mighty men of renown. Verse 5. And saw Yahweh that was great the wickedness of man in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was altogether evil all the time. And the spirit of humanity saw that these nations were all about great wickedness all the time. The reformist king noticed that the Ensi were corrupt from the top to the bottom, and that the whole thing was not very conducive to the citizens, because the people who had figured out how to get to power had created a corrupt system, and they spent an awful lot of time fighting wars for power and domination and control, and that every intent of the thought of the heart of these people was evil all the time. Genesis 6:6. And sorry, Yahweh, that he had made man on the earth, and he was grieved in his heart. And the spirit of the people started regretting the fact that they formed little nations, because the control of those nations had gotten away from them and they had just become a nightmare to live in. And they were sad that they ever were part of their creation. Seven. So said Yahweh, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, from man and beast to creeping thing and birds of the air, for I am sorry that I have made them. And the spirit of the people said, we're going to rise up and burn this place down. This system is not working, and I'm going to wipe it off of the face of the earth, including the beasts. Remember, these animals represent the class systems inside of this society, from the very structure of the nation to the each class system, to the merchants and the elites and the priests, because humanity, the spirit of the people, regretted what they have made. One could argue in many ways that the golem, in fact, left field alert, there's an old Jewish tale of a golem. And a golem, in the most common version of the tale, was like there's this one famous one where an old man and a woman were married, and they didn't have a child, so they wanted to have a child, but they were too old to have children. So the man fashioned a child out of clay, and then he performed these magical rites, and the clay came to life and became this golem, this creature, and they were going to treat it like their son. But they found it very difficult to control this golem. And, at first it was nice, but then it just sort of got out of hand, and it started terrorizing the neighborhood, and before you know it, I think it ended up killing the wife, and the husband had to, I think, perform another magical ritual to get it to shut off, or it killed him too, and off into the distance it went. Either way, these clay golems tend to be very difficult. And sometimes you just gotta, make them go away. Verse 8. But Noah found grace in the eyes of Yahweh. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the spirit of humanity. So the real question then becomes, who's Noah? And how does this work? So who is Noah? Now, I previously stated that Noah was in fact the Akkadian Empire. So the impulse on these things is to say Noah is Sargon of Akkad. And that's not quite how this works. A man represents the people, the nation. Sargon would be maybe like he's a piece of that, right? So the Akkadian Empire lasted 150 years or whatever it was. And so he's one chunk of that whole name. So it's not simply Sargon of Akkad. Let's take a look again at that Genesis 6:8 verse and see here what it says. It says, "But Noah found grace in the eyes of Yahweh." So Noah found grace in the eyes of the spirit of humanity. But Noah, what does it say about Noah? But Noah, rest. Like it's not even ambivalent. It's not even multiple things. So the name of this man is Rest. And he found favor in the people. And that is an interesting concept. If we just take away the literal nature of this thing, and we said, what is the Akkadian Empire? What made it so much better to live in than, say, Sumer during this end part that had obviously become problematic, right? So how does the Akkadian Empire deserve the name Rest? So the best we can do, and the best way I can describe this is just to sort of explain it to you by letting you see different sources as it talks about it. So the Akkadian Empire was an ancient Semitic empire centered in the city of Akkad, which united all the indigenous Akkadian-speaking Semites and the Sumerian speakers under one rule. The empire controlled Mesopotamia, the Levant, and parts of Iran. Its founder was Sargon of Akkad. Under Sargon and his successors, the Akkadian Empire reached its political peak between the 24th and 22nd centuries BCE. Akkad is sometimes regarded as the first empire in history. Sargon claimed to be the son of Laibam or Itibel, a humble gardener, and possibly a Herodul or priestess to Ishtar or Inanna. Some later claim that his mother was an Entu priestess, originally a cupbearer to King Zababa of Kish. Sargon became a gardener, which gave him access to the disciplined corps of workers, who also may have served as his first soldiers. Displacing Zababa, Sargon was crowned king and began a career of foreign conquest. He invaded Syria and Canaan on 4 different campaigns and spent 3 years subduing the countries of the west to unite them with Mesopotamia into a single empire. Sargon's empire reached westward as far as the Mediterranean Sea and perhaps Cyprus, northwards as far as the mountains, remember that, eastwards over Elam, and then as far south as Magan Oman, a region over which he purportedly reigned for 56 years. Although only 4 years names survive, he replaced rulers with noble citizens. He replaced rulers with noble citizens of Akkad. He replaced rulers with noble citizens of Akkad. Trade extended from the silver mines of Anatolia to the lapis lazuli mines of Afghanistan, and from the cedars of Lebanon to the copper of Magan. The empire's breadbasket was the rain-fed agricultural system of northern Mesopotamia, Assyria, and a chain of fortresses was built to control the imperial wheat production. Sargon, throughout his long life, showed special deference to the Sumerian deities, particularly Inanna Ishtar, his patroness, and Zababa, the warrior god of Kish. He called himself the anointed priest of Anu, the greatest Ensi of Enlil. If I could think of anything that was not the traditional understanding of what a flood is, a Sargon of Akkad does not seem like a great flood in a literal sense, right? Because what is a flood? What is a flood? A flood is a raging wall of water. It's the skies opening, it's the ground opening, it's this whole world is covered except for this one boat. It's the safety, right? The flood. So how can Sargon of Akkad, how can the Empire of Akkad, what does that have to do with those images? And I think I've stated this once, but I think it needs to be stated again. Nobody ever asked your goddamn opinion about this book. They just told you it was a flood. The words say flood. The images say flood. Don't question it. It's a flood. But it can also be a metaphor, an analogy. It can be telling you about a flood that is not a flood, that is possible. I have stated as we go along that things mean other things. And one of the big ones is water. And water does not mean H2O. It's not a liquid you drink. Not in this book. Not according to this person that wrote it. I didn't write it. This is not what they mean. It's just not what they mean. It's just not. Water is knowledge. It's just what it means. So a flood of knowledge that destroyed the known world. And the only survivors were on the ark.